Tosa Nikki, the Tosa Diary. A diary is customarily penned in the manner of men. Nevertheless, I will endeavor to compose it in the manner of women. On the 21st day of the 12th month in the 4th year of Shohei, we set out at the hour of the dog, that is, toward the 8th to 10th watch of the evening. I put down a few notes about the matter. A certain man, having served as governor for 4 or 5 years, performed the prescribed formalities, received the JU certificate, and left his official residence for the place where vessels were to take him aboard. Neighbors and strangers alike accompanied him to the shore. Those who had long kept company, unable to bear the separation, spent their days in continual talk, and before they were aware of it, the evening had come upon them. On the 22nd day, I offered prayers for a safe passage as far as Izumi Province. Fujiwara no Takazane presented a parting gift called Uma no Hanamyuke, though we were bound to the sea. High and middle and low, all drank freely, behaving oddly and making sport beside the saline strand. On the 23rd, there came a man named Yasunori Yagi. He was not necessarily one who would hold an office in the governor's household. Yet he presented a horse as a parting gift with proper ceremony. Was this because of the governor nature? As is customary among provincial folk, many think there is no need to make further visits, and yet those who hold true feeling came without hesitation. This is not mere praise, because something was given. On the 24th, a monk came to take leave. Everyone, from the great to the low and even children, had drunk, and those who could not even form the numeral 1 were stamping about in the shape of 10 and playing. On the 25th, a messenger from the governor's mansion brought a summons. Having been summoned and gone, they spent a day and a night in revelry, and dawn at last arrived. On the 26th, yet another feast was held at the governor house. There was much uproar, and even the attendants were made to carry splendid objects. They raised their voices and recited Chinese verse. They exchanged Japanese poems, host and guest and others present alike. I shall not set down the Chinese poem here. The Japanese poem offered was by the host, the incoming governor. Leaving the capital to meet you I had come, yet although I came, we now part, how lamentable. Thus the song sung by the governor ere he returned to the capital went, along the far sea roads, where the white waves stretch like cloth, to go and return. The one who should resemble me is none other than you. There were other pieces, but none seemed to excel. Speaking in many ways, the old governor and the new went down into the garden, and the present master and his predecessor clasped hands and did some merry thing under wine's influence, one departing while the other arrived. On the 27th, we pushed off from Atsu and headed toward Yurato. In the midst of it all, a girl, born in Kyoto yet dying in this province, passed away suddenly, and those who were arranging departure could speak nothing. As I return to Kyoto, only that child death fills me with sorrow and longing. Some could not bear it. At that time, a certain person wrote and presented a poem. The grief of those who think of returning to the capital is that there is one who will never return. And sometimes, believing she still remains, I forget and keep asking, where is she? This is what rends the heart. While they spoke thus, at a place called Keigo no Saki the governor brothers, and others brought sake and followed. They went down to the shore, sat, and said that parting was grievous. Among the retinue of the governor's house, these visitors are the ones called sincere, and in truth it had some plausibility. Declaring the sorrow of parting, those people, with their nets held together, produced a poem there by the seaside. Will any think of me so kindly as to impede my going? Like wild ducks assembled, I have come here. Since they spoke thus, the man who praised it greatly and was to depart composed one. Even as I prop the pole, I perceive in you a heart whose depths cannot be fathomed. While they spoke like this, The Kagetori, ignorant of the true feeling of things, drank their own liquor. And so, intending to leave swiftly, they said, "The tide has risen. The wind will likely blow," and with clamor they tried to enter the boat. At that moment some, in keeping with the occasion, recited Chinese verses fitting to the hour. And a certain person, though from the West provinces, sang Kai songs. When thus sung, it is said that even the dust of the boatyard dispersed, and the clouds traversing the heavens drifted away. This night we lodged at Yurato. Fujiwara no Takazane, Takebana no Suhira, and others accompanied. On the 28th, we sailed from Yurato and made for Aminato. Meanwhile, the son of the former governor, Chisato Yamaguchi, brought sake and good provisions and placed them aboard. We would eat and drink as we traveled. On the 29th, we rested at Aminato. The apothecary, taking special care, brought Toso and Hakusen, adding sake. It gave an appearance of sincerity. On New Year Day, we remained in the same place. A person who had Hakusen wedged it into the boathouse for the night, and the wind flung it loudly into the sea so they could not drink it. No potatoes, no seaweed, no hagatame to harden teeth. This province lacks such things. We had not sought them beforehand. Only the pressed sweetfish, sucked at the mouth. I wonder what the pressed sweetfish, bitten and sucked by these people's lips, thinks. Today, nothing but the capital weighs on my mind. They speak of the heads of the Zui on the cords of commoners' gates. On the second day, we still tarried at Aminato. The Koshi sent things, sake and other items. On the third, we remained in the same place. Is there a heart that clings to the brief calm amid wind and wave? I feel uneasy. On the fourth, because the wind blew, we could not depart. Masatsura contributed sake and fine goods. A person who brings such things cannot simply leave them unsaid. A small grant, even the smallest, cannot go without comment. It has a lively aspect, yet loses its feeling. On the fifth, because the wind and waves persisted, we stayed still. People, without ceasing, came and visited. On the sixth, it was much the same as yesterday. It became the seventh. We remained in the same anchorage. This day I think of the white horse, but in vain. Only the whiteness of the waves is visible. While this continued, from places called Ike and other known spots there were no carp, but beginning with crucian and river and sea fishes, goods were continuously borne in long chests and sent over. Placed with young greens in baskets, pheasants and the like were added beside flowers. The young greens announce the day. There is a song. Since it lies in a field where short grass grows, these young greens were plucked from a pond without water. It is a most amusing thing. This pond is the name of the place. A refined person followed a man down from the capital and took up residence there. The contents of that long chest were given to all, from grown men to children, so they were abundantly satisfied, and the boatmen beat their bellies like drums, startling the sea and surely raising waves. Thus in that time, many things occurred. Today I will recall the name of the person who had the wrapping cloth brought. What was it? I shall remember now. That man had a heart to compose a poem. That was the reason. Saying many things and lamenting that the waves rose, he composed a poem. Ahead on the path, the sound of rising white waves more than my belated cry, my voice shall surpass. Thus he made it. He must have uttered it in a very loud voice. Compared with the things brought, what is the song? Though this and that praised the song, none composed a reply. Even the proper person was present, but that person merely praised the song, ate the food, and the night deepened. The composer declared, "I am not going back yet," and rose. A child of a certain household whispered. Mero says, "I will compose a reply to that song." They cried, "How marvelous. Will you try reciting?" He said, "If you are to recite, do so quickly." The child said, "I will wait for the person who said, 'I am not going back yet,' and make my poem after waiting and searched for him. But perhaps because night had grown late, he departed as he was." People asked doubtfully, "How did you compose it in the first place?" This child, as might be expected, was too abashed to say anything. When pressed, the poem he recited was, "Both those who go and those who stay, the river of tears from their sleeves, only the water edge grows more soaked." And so he made it. Is this how one ought to speak? Perhaps because the child is endearing. I had not thought so at all. What can children alone truly accomplish? It were better for an old woman or old man to press it, be it bad or otherwise. It seems to have been sent forward should opportunity arise. On the 8th, various things transpired, and I remain in the same place. This night, the moon entered the sea. Seeing that, I recall Lord Narahira's poem, "Even if the ridge of the mountain flees, may it not vanish." Had I framed a poem by the strand, might I have said, "If only the waves rose and kept all away." Now recalling that verse, a poem a certain person seems to have made is, "Seeing the shining moon flow, the harbor where the Milky Way appears lay upon the sea." Such was its sense. On the 9th at early morning, we rode out from Aminato, bound for Naba anchorage. Those who said that they would come as far as the province borders had come to see us off. Among many stood Fujiwara no Takazane, Takebana no Suhira, and Hasbe no Yukinari, who had followed us from place to place since the time of parting at the governor's residence. They were people of sterling devotion. The depth of their fidelity should be no less than the depth of this sea. From here, now, they would pull away and depart. Intending to see us off, they kept on. Thus, while we rowed, even those who had lingered by the strand grew distant. Those on the boat disappeared from view. There may be words left on the shore and thoughts aboard the boat, yet all is vain. Even so, treating the song as a private soliloquy, it came to an end. The heart that sends longing afar crosses the sea, yet since no letters come, is there aught they do not know? So we passed the pine grove of Yuta. The number of its pines, how great, how many thousand years they have stood, I cannot tell. So we passed the pine grove of Yuta. Waves beat at each root, and cranes fly back and forth among the branches. So we passed the pine grove of Yuta. Finding it too bewitching to endure, a passenger composed a poem, so we passed the pine grove of Yuta. Looking out, the cranes perched upon each treetop seemed to imagine themselves comrades of 1,000 generations. So we passed the pine grove of Yuta. This poem cannot better the sight when one gazes upon the place. So we passed the pine grove of Yuta. As the boat was rowed and the scene observed, the mountains and the sea darkened, night fell, neither west nor east was visible, and the guidance of the oarsmen was left to chance. Since the men were unaccustomed, they felt great unease. Moreover, the women, with their foreheads pressed to the boat bottom, did not but weep. Thinking as such, the boatmen and helmsmen sang their boat songs and took no heed. The song they chanted was, in the spring fields, crying aloud, with young silver grasses cutting and cutting hands the picked vegetables do the parents eat. Does the mother-in-law eat? Shall we go back? I wonder if a small child will come tonight. Begging for money, telling lies, buying on credit without bringing money even oneself does not come hearing the boatmen's chant, pondering thus. There were many others, yet I will not set them down. Listening to the laughter raised at such things, though the sea raged, my heart eased a little. Thus, traveling until nightfall, we reached a harbor where among them one old man and one young woman, feeling ill, ate nothing and fell asleep. On the 10th, we anchored at this Naha harbor. On the 11th, we sailed at dawn toward Muratsu. While everyone still slept, I could not discern the sea's condition, only the west and east by the moon's position. By the time this had passed, it was fully dawn. We washed our hands, performed the usual tasks, and noon came. Now I have come to a place called Heian. A small child, hearing the name, asked, "Is Heian like a bird feather?" As such come from a young child, people laughed. At that moment, a girl there fashioned a poem. If this place indeed answers to its name Heian, I wish I could fly to the capital. So she said, men and women alike have a heart yearning to hasten to the capital. So though the verse is poor, they agreed and did not forget it. Taking the child's query about Heian as occasion, I thought again of the child who died, and when shall I ever forget? Today all the more the mother grieves, because the number who came down from the capital is insufficient. Recalling the old song, it seems they return with numbers wanting. One composed a poem, though many emotions dwell in this world, none exceeds the love a parent bears a child. So saying, and so he said, on the 12th no rain fell. Funtoki, on Kormachi's boat, had been delayed. They reached Muratsu from Narashi. At dawn on the 13th, a fine mist fell. It lingered a while and ceased. Some men and women descended to a good place nearby to bathe. When I looked at the sea, the clouds all seemed like waves. I wished there were a fisherman to ask which is sea. Thus a poem was made. Now, as the 10th day of the month has passed, the moon is pleasant. Since we boarded the ship, no one wears deep crimson robes aboard. Saying they feared the sea, God, they hid in the shade of reeds, and without meaning to, displayed the sushi of pickled sea, cucumbers, wife, and abalone up to their shins. On the 14th, rain fell at dawn, so we stayed the same. The ship's master performed a ritual. As there were no side dishes, after noon the oarsman used the sea bream he had caught the day before. Lacking money, rice was given in exchange, and they could break their fast. There were still such small things. The oarsman brought a sea bream again. We often gave him rice and sake. His bearing was not poor. On the 15th, we did not make red bean gruel. Regretful, and with the weather foul, progress lagged. More than 20 days had already passed. Passing the days idly, people simply stared at the sea. A little girl said, if one stands, the other stands. If one sits, the other sits. Thinking on the blowing wind and waves, I wonder, are they companions? What the small child said was indeed apt. On the 16th, as wind and waves did not abate, we remained in the same place. Merely because the sea had not calmed, we thought only of when we might pass the place called Misaki. The wind and waves do not promise to die down. A song composed by one who saw the rising waves runs thus. They say that frost never settles there, yet within the waves snow did fall. From the day we boarded the ship until now it has been 25 days. On the 17th, the clouds that had dimmed the sky dispersed, and because the dawn moonlit night was very fair, we set out and rowed. Meanwhile the clouds above and the sea below echoed one another. An old man jested, the pole pierces the moon upon the waves, and the ship presses the sky into the sea. I heard him laughing. Also a song by a certain person said, that which the pole of the boat touches as it rises from the water towards the moon must be a katsura tree. Hearing this, someone made a poem looking at the shadow, rowing across the long heaven beneath the waves. I am companionless. While they said this, the night slowly paled, and the oarsman cried, a black cloud has suddenly appeared. The wind will surely blow. They said, we shall put about, and they returned. Rain fell in that hour. How miserable. On the 18th, we remained in the same place. The sea raged, so we did not sail. Seen from near or far, this harbor is singularly pleasing. Even so, because of my grief naught comes to mind. Perhaps the men recite Chinese verse to ease their hearts. Since the ship lay idle, a certain person composed a poem. On the shore where waves strike, only snow falls, not knowing months or years. This poem came from one not given to frequent verse. Another person made a poem. On the wind-beaten shore of waves, only flowers bloom that neither warbler nor spring perceives. Hearing that such songs were somewhat fair, the old man in command of the ship, wishing to ease his pained month, composed. The wind blowing waves toward us makes them seem like snow or flowers, and thus deceives the eyes. These poems, talked of among the company, were again heard by a certain person who then made a verse. That poem, 37 syllables, 30 and 7 more, seemed to set everyone to laughter. The poet, plainly vexed, began to grumble. Even if I try to mimic it, I cannot. Even if written down, it would be hard to read through. Even now, it is difficult to say. What will become of it from here? On the 19th, the weather remained foul, so we did not sail. On the 20th, it was like yesterday. We stayed and all lamented. Oppressed by pain and anxiety, they counted the days that had passed. Today, the 20th, the 30th, and if they did so, even their fingers might be worn. Very lonely. At night, I could not sleep. The moon rose on the night of the 20th. There were no mountain peaks. It rose from the sea. Seeing such a thing, long ago Abe no Nakamaro, who had gone to Tang, when he prepared to return, the people there held a farewell and, lamenting their parting, composed Chinese verse until the moon rose on that night. Perhaps unsatisfied, they remained until the moon rose on the 20th. That moon rose out of the sea. Seeing it, Nakamaro's lord said, "In our land such songs have been sung since the age of the gods, and now all men, high and low, sing them at parting and in joy and sorrow." And he recited a poem. Looking back at the blue sea, the moon that rose over Mount Mikasa in Kasuga is the same moon that now rises here. So he rendered it. They seemed not to grasp it fully, yet the sense of the verse was set down in Chinese characters and explained to the one who carried the words here, and to my great surprise, they praised it to the utmost. Though China's speech and ours differ, the moon's shadow is the same, perhaps human hearts likewise. Now, recalling that time, a poem by a certain person runs. In the capital it was seen at the mountain ridge, yet here it rises from the waves and sinks into them. On the 21st, we sailed at the hour of the rabbit. All the ships took to sea. Watching them, it seemed as if autumn leaves were scattered upon the spring sea. Perhaps because of earnest prayer, the wind did not blow. The day was propitious, and we rowed onward. Meanwhile, a child accompanying us desired to be sent. The child's song was, "Still, the direction of my home draws my gaze. I think my father and mother are there. Go home, go home." To sing such a thing, how piteous. Listening to that, as we rowed, a bird called a kawazu gathered upon a rock. White waves beat about the rock's base. The steersman said, "White waves wash to the base of the black bird." This remark could not be neatly labeled, yet it sounded as though it spoke some sense. It is reproached for not suiting one's rank. As we went on, the steersman looked at the waves and said, "Since leaving the province, I have begun to fear pirates and the sea, and my head has whitened. 70 and 80 are things of the sea. Which is whiter, my snowy hairs or the white waves on the beach, O guardian of the offing isle?" Say on helmsman. On the 22nd, we left the harbor where we had stopped and made for another anchorage. Mountains showed in the distance. There was a boy of about 9, whose countenance seemed younger than his years. As the boat moved, he saw the mountains seeming to move and thought, "How strange," and made a poem. That verse ran, "Seeing from the boat as it goes, even the mountains seem to move. Do not the pines know?" It was fit for a child's utterance. This day the sea boiled. Snow fell on the shore and flowers bloomed. A poem composed was, though I had heard them as mere waves, when I looked their color was mingled with snow and flowers, indeed. On the 23rd the sun shone and then clouds gathered. In these parts there is fear of pirates, so we pray to gods and Buddhas. On the 24th, we stayed as on the day before. On the 25th, the north wind blew fiercely, so we did not launch the boat. Rumors of pursuing pirates were heard unceasingly. On the 26th, indeed, because they said pirates followed us, we put the boat out and rowed by night. There is a place along the way at which to pray. Having ordered the boatmen and offered the sacred cloth, the cloth was cast toward the east, and what the boatman said in reverence was, "In the direction where this cloth has scattered, pray the august boat be rowed swiftly." At that the girl wove a verse, "O wind that follows the sacred cloth offered to the sea, God, may you blow without ceasing." Because the wind favored us, the boatman heaped pride and hallooed and raised the ship's sail. Hearing the sound, children and old women who had yearned for it were joyful. Among them, an old woman of Awaji made a poem. When the following wind has blown, the moving ship strikes its sail, and that brings delight. So she uttered, "Pray for fair weather." On the 27th, the wind renewed and the waves rose, so we did not launch the boat. All lamented both here and there. To soothe the men's minds, and hearing phrases such as "the capital lies far when one looks toward the sun" in Chinese verse, a certain woman made a song. Even the sun, seen near the heavenly clouds, yet the road I think of toward the capital grows so distant. Another person composed, "So long as the wind blows, the waves swell and press near, and the path ahead grows ever farther. Day after day, the wind does not cease." He plucked his own fingers and slept. On the 28th, rain fell without cease through the night. This morning likewise. On the 29th, we set sail and went. The sun shone mild as we rowed. Seeing my nails grown long, I counted the days and found today to be the day of the mouse, so I did not pare them. Since it is New Year's, I think on the day of the rat in the capital and say, if only there were a small pine, yet being at sea makes it hard. A certain woman sent out a song, how vague it is today the day of the rat? If I were a diver, I would at least drag up some sea, pine, if but I could. At sea, what shall a song for the rat day be? Again, a person made a poem. Though it is today, I do not gather young greens, for Kasuga Bay I row across lacks them. Saying this, we rowed. We brought the boat close to a pleasant place and asked, "Where is this?" And were told it is Tosa's harbor. Once a woman who had dwelt in a place called Tosa was aboard. She said, "It bears the name of where I long dwelt. How moving and composed. As it bears the name of the place where I lived long years, I even look toward the approaching waves with a heart full of sorrow." On the 30th, wind and rain were absent. Hearing that pirates would not prowl at night, we launched about midnight and crossed the Awa Water Gate. As it was the depth of night, west and east could not be seen. Men and women prayed earnestly to gods and Buddhas and crossed this sea way. Around the hours of the Tiger and Rabbit, we passed Noshima and crossed Tanakawa. Hastening as we could, we reached the Izumi shore. This day the sea bore not a likeness of waves. It seemed to have the favor of gods and Buddhas. Counting from the day I boarded the ship, it has now been 30 days and 9 more. Having come to Izumi land, there are indeed no pirates. On the first day of the second month, in the morning rain fell. When it ceased about the hour of the horse, we left a place called Izumi no Nada and rowed on. On the sea, as on the day before, wind and waves were absent. We went along the Kurosaki pine grove. The name is black, the pines are blue, the waves on the shore look like snow. The color of the shells is a deep purple, red. To make 5 colors, one is still lacking. Meanwhile, today we passed from a place named Hako no Yura. being towed by rope. As we moved, someone made a song. On days when the waves of Hako no Yura lie low, who does not behold the sea as a mirror? Again the ship's lord said, lamenting that the month has come, unable to endure sorrow, he uttered a verse to ease his spirit. The rope by which the boat is pulled, so long, thus I have passed long spring days, 40 or 50 in count. Listeners thought secretly, why make so small a matter a lament? The ship's lord, barely able to get the words out, thought the poem fair. Such murmurs ceased. Suddenly, the wind and waves rose, and we stayed. On the second day, rain and wind continued. Day and night I pray to gods and Buddhas. On the third, the sea remained as before, so we did not sail. As the wind did not abate, the shore's waves came and went. The poem I made in connection ran thus. Twisting the thread avails me nothing. The tears that fall and gather cannot be pierced. Thus today ended. On the fourth, the helmsman said, the wind and clouds are very bad today, and it was resolved not to set out. Yet all day the wind and waves did not rise. This helmsman was a dull fellow who could not foresee weather. On the beach of the harbor, there were many fair shells and stones. Accordingly, a crew member longed for the old acquaintance on board and made a poem. Waves that come to shore, if only you would wash up the forgetful shell that makes me forget the loved one, then I will land and pick it up. When that was said, another could not endure and made a verse to lighten the heart aboard ship. I shall not pick up the forgetful shell. Even the longing for the white jewel I will keep as a talisman. Thus it is said, for a daughter, a parent surely becomes like a child. Who would say there were times she was not like a jewel? Yet they also say the child who died had a fair countenance. Lamenting again the passing of days in the same spot, a certain woman made a poem, reaching in with hands, in a spring where chill is not felt, unmindful of drawing water, many days have passed. On the fifth, today, at last we moved from the Izumi shore to the harbor of Azu. Even the sight of the pine grove is now distant. Because of divers hardships, the verse made runs. Though I go, I cannot quite reach the pine grove on Azu shore where my beloved spins her thread. As I spoke, thus the boatman urged, row quickly, the weather is fair, and the steersman told the crew, the master has given command. They said, before the north wind comes at morning, pull the rope fast. That phrase, sounding like a poem, was because it was the steersman's spontaneous word. He did not clearly mean, I spoke a poem, yet when they wrote it down it proved a little over 30 syllables. Today everyone prayed all day that the wind not rise, and as a sign, the wind and waves remained calm. At that time, a place where gulls played was near, and a child, overjoyed that Kyoto drew nigh, composed a poem. I have prayed that the wind not blow, and now I think it is the time of stillness, yet how strange that even the gulls seem as waves stirred by wind. As we went, the pine grove at a place called Ishizu was fair, and the shore lay remote. Again, we rode through the Sumiyoshi crossing. A certain person composed, now having seen it, I come to know myself. Before the pines of Sumi no I have already passed. Here is a poem by the mother of one long gone, who never forgot her child for a day. Bring the boat to Sumi no I, wondering if the forget plant might help, I go to pluck it. It is not that I mean to forget thoughtlessly, but to lay aside my longing for a season and renew the strength to love again. As I said this and kept my gaze, unexpectedly a wind arose, and though we rowed and rowed, we found ourselves driven backward and feared being cast ashore. The oarsman said, this Sumino deity must be the usual god. Perhaps he has something he desires. Does that not sound a trifle modern? Then, following the counsel to offer the sacred cloth, I respectfully presented the offering. Though I cast it, the wind ceased not. Rather it increased, and the waves piled higher still. Seeing danger in wind and wave, the helmsman said again, since the sacred cloth does not reach the divine heart, the boat will not move. "Offer, then, what the deity would be pleased by," he said. I answered, "What can I possibly offer?" and added, "I have 2 eyes after all." Saying, "Offer the single mirror," I flung it into the sea, and it was a thing of regret. Therefore, as the sea suddenly became like a mirror, a certain person composed, into the raging sea, into the heart of the mighty god, I cast a mirror and then saw it. It is surely not a deity called Wasaregusa of Sumino, nor Haim Matsu of the shore. I truly saw the god's heart in the mirror. That is what I saw. The heart of the helmsman was indeed the heart of the god. On the 6th, leaving the base of Miyatsukashi, I came to Naniwa and entered the river mouth. All people, women and old men alike, placed foreheads to one another in rejoicing as never before. That seasick old woman of Awaji raised her head from the boat's bottom at the words that the capital neared and spoke thus. Wishing it would be soon, through the reeds at Naniwa Bay, the honored boat at last drew nigh. Since one wholly unexpected spoke, the people were amazed. Among them, the ship lord, troubled in heart, was deeply moved and said, "Is this not beyond the face of the seasick woman?" On the 7th, we launched from the river mouth and began to pull upstream, but the channel had ebbed and our craft was sorely hindered. It is very hard for a boat to go against such shallows. Meanwhile, the ship lord was sickly and by nature blunt and unskilled in such matters, knowing nothing at all. Yet moved by the old Awaji woman's song, and perhaps because we were near the capital, we mustered a queer little verse. The song ran, having at last come, because the river's channel is shallow. Both boat and I are bogged today. This must have been born of his illness. Since that single poem did not satisfy, another was offered, I think, hurry. What hampers the boat is because the river heart is shallow, so myself is to blame. This was spoken for lack of words, to contain the joy of nearing the capital. It was less than the Awaji lady's song. Muttering, how vexing. I should not have said it. They passed into night and slept. On the 8th, still stranded at the riverside, we lay at a place called Torakai no Mamaki. That night, the boatman suffered much from his old malady. A certain person brought something fresh. "I will repay with rice." The men whispered, brought dried rice. Such things occur here and there. Today, being a seasonal observance, we abstain from fish. On the 9th, anxious, we tried at dawn to haul the boat forward, but with no water in the river, we could not even shift a foot. Meanwhile, there is a place called Akir no Tokoro at Wada no Tamari. Since they begged for rice and fish, we gave them both. Thus hauling the boat, we proceeded, and saw Nagisa no inn. That manor, reflecting on the past, was a fair place. On the hill behind there were pines. In the inner garden, plum blossoms were in bloom. People say this was famed in times gone by. The late Prince Korataka, accompanied by the late Narahira no Chujo, if cherry blossoms did not bloom in this world, the heart of spring would have remained at peace, so the poem was composed there. Of late, a man of refined taste composed a poem redolent of that place. Though the pines endure 1,000 years, the tone of ancient voices has altered not. Another person made, longing for you, the plum blossoms of the inn that stands through the ages still breathe the scent of bygone days. Saying this, they ascended rejoicing at the nearness of the capital. Among those who rose thus, when they departed the capital, they had all been children. It was on the land they reached that some had borne children. All disembark and embark with their children at each stop. Seeing that the mother of a child from long ago could not endure sorrow, though absent now present in return, though present now gone, returning is sorrowful. So she cried aloud. The father likewise must be wondering at his feelings. Such things, though called songs, ought not to exist. Is it the impulse that arises both in Morikoshi and here when one cannot bear one's heart? This night we lodge at a place called Udono. On the 10th there was hindrance. We could not ascend. On the 11th, a little rain fell and then ceased. As we rose, we saw a current flowing beside the eastern hill, and when asked, we were told, that is Hachiman Shrine. Hearing this, the people were overjoyed and paid reverence. Yamazaki Bridge could be seen. There was no end to their joy. At the edge of Tsuji Temple, our boat halted for a while, and various matters were settled. By the temple bank, many willows stood. One who saw the willow's shadow woven upon the riverbed composed, I see the patterns that rippling waves weave with the blue willow shade. On the 12th, we remained at Yamazaki. On the 13th, still at Yamazaki. On the 14th, rain fell. Today, someone was sent to Kyoto to fetch a carriage. On the 15th, the carriage was brought. Because the boat proved difficult, we transferred to a private house. That household seemed full of joy and received us hospitably. Seeing the goodness of that host and his household stirs an undefinable unease. Various courtesies were returned. The family did not come and go foolishly. They were somewhat restrained. On the 16th in the evening, I ascended to the capital. Along the way, the painting on the small shrine at Yamazaki and the bend of the road remained unchanged. They say, I do not know the heart of the seller. Thus on the road to the capital, they hosted us at Shimazaka. It is not that such things must not be. Compared with the time of departure, at homecoming people had undergone many changes. We returned those courtesies likewise. Thinking to enter the capital by night, the moon rose ere I hastened. Under bright moonlight, we crossed the Katsura. People said, since this river is not the Asuka, its shallows and depths remain unchanged. And one who said so composed, the Katsura River, lit by the eternal moon, even its shadow at the bottom did not alter. Another said, the Katsura River, beneath the breadth of heavenly clouds, I crossed though my sleeves were wet. A different person made, the Katsura River does not reach my heart, yet it seems to flow with equal depth. Because of the overwhelming joy at entering the capital, even the number of poems swelled. As night deepened places here, and there became unseen. Having entered the capital and stood, I felt joy. Arriving home, entering through the gate, the moon shone bright and I could plainly see the state of the house. It was worse than I had heard, broken and tattered. Surely the heart of the man entrusted with the house must be in ruins. Though there is a fence, it stands like a single dwelling. I had hoped to entrust it. Because I had relied upon him, I let him obtain things without hindrance. Tonight I cannot let him speak of such things loudly, but though it appears grievous, I will try to set my resolve. Now there is a place, sunk like a pond filled with water. There were pines at its edge. In the span of 5 or 6 years has 1,000 years passed. A branch on one side has vanished. New shoots now mingle with the old. Most things have gone to ruin, and people say, ah, how pitiful. I cannot forget, and I long for it, but how sorrowful that I return not with the daughter born in this house. Those on the boat are all embraced by children and make merry. Amidst this, there is a song that could not hold its sadness, and was said known only to those of deep understanding. Seeing the small pine at my lodging, born but not returned, I grieve. And so it is said. Shall I never be content, or will it be so again? If the pine I saw should live 1,000 years, will a long, sorrowful separation await? There are many things hard to forget and lamentable, yet I cannot fully set them forth. In any event, I desire to rend this up.